It's really easy to think in business that the majority of people are unethical and immoral, and they're taking advantage of you. And the only way to get ahead is to step on all the small people. And that's how I think a lot of people think about capitalism. They think about billionaires. Oh, they took their wealth from somebody else. They're only there because they have robbed the poor and they're exploiting people, right? That word gets used a lot, exploitation. And so it's really easy to create this narrative that people in the world who are successful or building successful businesses are probably morally unethical or dubious, or they're just evil people. And you see news reports all the time about people who go too far. You hear the Bernie Madoffs with the Ponzi schemes, and the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the FTX world, and the Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos. You hear these big stories of fraud, of deception, of theft, and it happens. It happens, but it doesn't happen in the way I think people think it does. I don't think it happens as the result of intentional lies and deception and this desire to deceive and dominate people. I actually think the majority of immoral behaviors that occur in business and in life in general results from good intentions. You know, you hear that idea that the road to hell, the path to hell is paved in good intentions. And I'm sharing this right now because, as I've alluded to in previous podcasts, like I'm going through something in one of my businesses right now. I've had this issue with a business partner where we uncovered some really dubious behaviors, really unethical behaviors that are absolutely, it's hard when you find yourself in this situation where your trust has been betrayed or you feel deceived. It's really easy to jump to this place of like, oh, that person's evil. They did this all very knowingly and they're just, bad people. It's very easy to jump to that. And then you're left sitting there wondering, and I've wondered this a lot. I've had a lot of conversations with close friends and confidants and advisors, and just trying to understand, like, how do we get here? How do we get to this place? Like, at what point, as you're making these decisions that are so clear in hindsight as being bad decisions, is like, that's not the right thing to do here. How does somebody justify that? Like, in the same way, this is a really extreme example, but sometimes to prove the point, you have to go to the extremes. Is like, how do the Nazis take the average German and turn him into a killing machine to do these horrible, atrocious things that under normal circumstances nobody would ever think to do? And it's really easy to believe that that is them, not you. And yet there's plenty of research, and one of the areas of my life that I've devoted a lot of time to studying is psychology and criminal psychology. And you might not know that about me, but one of my degrees is in psychology, and I studied a lot the sociopathic and psychopathic behavioral tendencies. And there's this guy, Zimbrata, I think his name's Zimbrata, something like that, starts with a Z. He did a lot of research into and wrote a book called, I think, The Lucifer Effect, where he effectively looked into the nature of good and evil and tried to discern, like, how do good people, who people believe themselves to be good, how do they go out there and do these horrible things in service of this larger calling, like in the ways of Nazi Germany or the Maoist communist regime? Like, there's so many examples of people who are otherwise would consider themselves to be good and moral to go and do these incredibly horrible things. And we convince ourselves that that's them, not us, that there's something different about them, that we in that same situation would never do that thing. And the crux of Philip's research was really showing, like, no, actually, given the right circumstances, the right incentives, anybody can be made to do horrible things. And one of the examples in the study was, they would take a stranger into a room and they would sit them down at this control panel, and there would be another person in another room. And the person at the control panel would be told, hey, push that button and it's going to deliver a mild shock to the other person. And at first the person's like, oh, I don't know about that. They're like, no, it's okay. It's not going to hurt him. It's not that. It's not, this is like a light tingling, right? So eventually the person goes, okay, yeah. And they push the button and they hear the person on the other end go, kind of shocked, right? And so the course of the study plays out, and they convince the person at the control panel through nothing more than just telling them to do the thing. They convince them to increase the shock over and over and over again until it goes above and beyond the most dangerous levels on the machine. It even says, do not go above this. It says danger, right? Like, and they're like, well, you sure about this? And the instructor, the researcher is saying, yes, do it, right? And the person just complies, like 70% or something like that. That might not be the exact number. It's like 60, between 60 and 80%. A large number of people go past the recommended safety amount. They go to the max, and they shock this person despite them still hearing the person in the other room screaming in agony. And they still do it with nothing more in this research environment, with nothing more than a person in a lab coat and a clipboard telling them to do it. It's insane. Now, these people weren't actually being shocked. It was an actor in the other room who's just pretending to get shocked. But I think about that study a lot because it's easy to think of ourselves as being above all that. And that in that same situation, we would not do that thing. We would have this moral courage to resist that. And yet the reality is, I think that we are all far more susceptible to doing these things than we think. And I share all that kind of as a prelude to, I'm trying to come to an understanding of the behaviors that the person on the other side of this did to bring us to this point. I'm trying to understand, because it doesn't do me any good just to point the finger and say you're evil and that's bad, you're wrong. I'm trying to understand, how did we get here? How did this happen? And there's a term called ethical shading, which is simply just, as we step over the line that we've created in our minds for between good and evil, right and wrong, good, bad, as you step over that line, you, in your own mind, you justify it. There's always a justification, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to pay for my parking this time because I'm only going in for 10 minutes, right? Next time you do it for 30. Next time it's 2 hours. Next time it's 5 hours, right? Or you're speeding just a little bit to get to work on time because you're running late in the morning. And next thing you know, now you're going 15 miles over the speed limit in the mornings. Now you're going 30 miles an hour over. And now you're just being reckless. Right? It's this ethical shading that occurs as we incrementally step further and further over that line between right and wrong, good and bad, and we justify why we're doing it, until you get to the point where you look up and you've made so many of those decisions that now you're going 70 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour school zone and you run over a kid. And it's like, how did you ever get here? Were you that reckless person? Are you that bad person who has disregard and like for the safety of others? No, it's just like this systematic process of diluting your own moral judgments. And you justify each one, because each one on their own, each activity, each question, each decision that needs to be made, you can justify it in the moment. There's always a justification. The human brain is like a justification machine. And sometimes you just go so far over the line that when you finally look up, you can't even see the line anymore. And everybody is looking and going, how did you ever get there? How did we get there? It doesn't make any sense. But it's not this one-time big decision. It's this compounding effect of all the tiny decisions leading you further and further away. And this is why I think a lot about the +1 decision-making framework, which is, Maslow, he said, that which we can be, we must be. And he gave this framework for helping us understand that when we're not moving towards our greatness, we feel that as individuals. When we're moving away from our greatness, we feel that too. When we're not living in alignment with who we could be, when we're making the negative decisions in our life, we feel that as discontent. We feel that in our souls as like this existential crisis. And so we offered this framework, the +1 framework, where imagine that you're standing in the middle of the road and in front of you, there's a road that stretches off onto the horizon. And at equal distances, there are these signs, each one saying +1, +1, +1. And if you were to turn around, that same road stretches off to the opposite horizon, and all the signs there, they say -1, -1, -1. And each sign simply represents a single decision that you can make in the moment. A single decision that could either move you forward towards your greatest self, or it moves you away from your greatest self. And sometimes those decisions are big, sometimes they're small, but it doesn't matter. In the context of this framework, each one is only +1 or -1. So do you drink the water, or do you drink the Coke? Or do you drink the vodka? Do you eat the salad, or do you eat the burger? Do you go to the gym, or do you sleep in? Each one of these is a +1 or a -1 decision. And this framework, the power of it for me is that You only ever get to, every decision only ever moves you forward one, but the negative decisions, they don't just move you back one, but they deny you the opportunity to move forward one. So the opportunity cost of making a bad decision is actually 2, whereas the opportunity of doing the right thing, it's only 1. And so you get further away from who you could be when you make bad decisions. And I share this just because I find it to be really empowering when you approach every decision in your life as being equally important and saying, in this moment, what is the +1 decision? What's the -1 decision? And then you can catch yourself from parking and not paying for 10 minutes. Is that the +1 decision or is that the -1 decision? It's the -1. You know it. Is speeding the +1 or is it the -1? It's the -1. Eliminate those -1 decisions and you won't find yourself getting anywhere near that line. You will never have to worry about looking up one day and saying, how did I get here? I don't even recognize myself anymore. And I want that more than anything else for you, because as I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing in real time, it's heartbreaking to see otherwise good people doing horrible, stupid, irresponsible things and saying, how did you do? That's not you. That's not you, but it is you, because those are the decisions that you've made that have brought it here. So I hope this brings you a little bit of value. It's a little bit different, a little bit more somber of a topic because of the just the severity of everything that's involved. But it's something that's well worth thinking about, because as you're on your path towards your greatest self, as you make more money, it is a tool for impact, but it can also be a tool for destruction if you're not careful, if you're not intentional about how you approach the whole thing. So I hope this brings you guys a little bit of value. If you enjoyed this podcast, do me a favor, just take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, tag me in it, the Anthony Vicino. I'd love to connect with you guys. Otherwise, that is it for me today. I will see you in the next episode.